Hello, everybody. Welcome. My name is Levi. I manage the artist residency programs here at Jack Straw. I want to start with a reminder for all of us that we're meeting this evening on the lands of the Duwamish, Suquamish, and Muckleshoot Nations and other Coast Salish peoples, past and present. And the staff, board, and artists of Jack Straw acknowledge that we're living, working, creating, and playing on the traditional land of the first people of Seattle and the Salish Sea, and we honor them and the land itself with deep gratitude. And I always feel a great sense of gratitude just being here in this room with artists and writers and people who love art and writing, so thank you. And thank you to our engineers, Aisha and Daniel. Aisha did a lot of juggling and finagling to make sure the live stream is working tonight, so hello out there. If you're seeing us, thank you. Oh, and I wanted to mention, I forgot to mention this last week, so we're celebrating the 29th Jack Straw Writers Anthology. Each year we publish a new anthology featuring each group of writers. If you're here in person, you should have gotten a copy. If you didn't, make sure you get one before you leave. If you're out there, there's a link, I think, in the description and in the comments to where you can purchase it from Open Books. That supports us, and it supports Open Books, who are a wonderful supporter of the arts and of poetry in Seattle. So we like to encourage people to buy things from them. And I think a lot of the poets that you've seen at Jack Straw over the years have books there. So it's worth stopping by their website or in person if you have not. The Writers Program is one of 3 artist residency programs here. They're all a little bit different. Each year we have a different curator who selects the writers for the Writers Program, and this year it's Kathleen Alcalá. We're very thrilled to have her. She was a 2-time Jack Straw writer, which is a quite rare honor, and now back as curator, and we really appreciate it. I also want to thank our funders, the City of Seattle Office of Arts and Culture, Fort Culture, Washington State Arts Commission, the NEA, Arts Fund, and Lester and Phyllis Epstein Foundation. And if any of those gave you pause, we do strongly encourage and appreciate individual contributions. I think a lot of organizations right now are, both arts and civil rights and so many things need your help. So however you can, it's greatly appreciated. Give Big just happened. If you were able to give then, we really appreciate it. Sort of a secret is that you can actually give to us at any time. And it does not matter if it's a particular day in May. So really, today, tomorrow, whenever you can do it is greatly appreciated. And again, just your presence means a lot. So thank you for being here. And with that, I will introduce our wonderful curator, Kathleen Alcalá, who will introduce our writers for the evening.
Thank you, Levi, and thank you to the rest of you for coming tonight, both the readers and the audience. I'm Kathleen. I'm going to give a brief introduction before I give you the bios on each of the readers tonight. I'm a little hoarse because I have spring allergies, so sorry. Poetry is Enchantment by former NEA chair and public poet Dana Goya stresses the oral tradition as the source of written poetry and prose. Poems were sung and acted as a collective honoring of memory and place. The Jack Straw program offers us a chance to reclaim this tradition. There's singing and crying in this collection, with traditions from as far apart as Iceland and Cambodia, the forests of Poland to the suburbs of Florida. Many of these writers are extremely accomplished and getting more accomplished by the minute, and I thank the staff at the Jack Straw Foundation for asking me to work with them. The more I consider these writers, I realize that they are survivors, and either personally of extreme circumstances or historically as the inheritors of stories. We tell stories in order to survive, but also to honor those who came before us. We name names, we consider what actions enabled our ancestors to survive, and we discard those things that hindered them. We uncover old stories people have tried to cover up, and we save objects that embody story. At the same time, these stories can be a burden, a sense of social justice or inheritance of family legacy can weigh on the writers who receive these stories. They feel compelled to find a way to express them. We don't just use words to tell stories. Many of these stories are grief transformed into beauty. They reflect the exhilaration and terror of being a survivor. I sense that these writers have found joy in getting to know each other, and I hope they carry that joy out of the Jack Straw Studios and into their publishing careers. Vi Hilbert was a revered Lushootseed storyteller who promoted active listening. A story calls for a response from the listener. I hope these stories call to you for a response, either by hearing them out loud at one of the public readings, on the Jack Straw blog, or in the published anthology of their work. Be an active listener. Share these stories. Respond to the writers. Take action to be sure these stories continue to be told and heard. And now, about our readers tonight. Nhatt Nichols is a multidisciplinary journalist, poet, and artist whose work focuses on the intersections of humans, animals, and their environment. A graduate of the Royal Drawing School in London, she uses words and images to cover food and environmental issues using solutions journalism practices for High Country News, Edible Magazine, Civil Eats, Modern Farmer, and the Daily Yonder. She's the founder and editor of the Jefferson County Beacon, a rural weekly news outlet. Nhatt is a 2024 Blue Sky Community Action Fellow and a 2023 Artist Trust Literary Gap Grant recipient for her project documenting the history of human-animal dependency and the current refugee crisis in Bielorussia, Europe's oldest forest. Her first museum show, Nhatt Nichols, The Willapa Oyster and Its Environs, was on display at the Columbia Pacific Heritage Museum in 2025. Her first book, This Party of Soft Things, Bored Wolves 2022, a heavily researched graphic poem, is now awaiting its third printing. Her first novella, Burned Morals, is forthcoming from Bored Wolves this summer. Monique Ouk is a Cambodian-American writer. Her poetry has been recognized by Stanford University, nominated for the Pushcart Prize, and appears in The Seventh Wave, The Margins, and Diode Poetry. She has received support from Jackson Hole Writers, For Culture, and Jack Straw. Currently, Monique is working on a novel set in the Cambodian countryside. Hilary Behrman's award-winning short stories have been described as deeply humane and unsettling, and have been published in journals, magazines, short story dispensers, and an anthology. Lake Effect, her debut collection of stories, was chosen by Lauren Groff as the winner of the 2024 Mary MacArthur Prize for Short Fiction and will be published by Saraban Books in 2026. Groff praised Lake Effects as a book of great moral power and heart by an author of extraordinary grace. Hilary is a recipient of the Chris O'Malley Prize in Fiction from the Madison Review. She has an MFA in fiction from Pacific University and was a participant in fiction at the Breadloaf Writers Conference. She's been a writer in residence at the National Willa Cather Center and an artist in residence at the Vashon Artist Residency. Hilary lives and writes in Seattle, where she raised 2 kids and worked as a children's civil rights lawyer and public defender. She's excited to be a part of the Jack Straw Writers Program and is working on her first novel. Connor Watkins-Xu holds a BA in professional writing from Baylor University and an MFA in creative writing from the University of Maryland, where he taught creative and academic writing. His poems have appeared or are forthcoming in Plowshares, North American Review, Redivider, Columbia Journal, Gargoyle, the Plowshares, North American Review, Redivider, oh, here we go, the Hong Kong Review, Salvation South, and elsewhere. His manuscript has been named a semifinalist for the Berkshire Prize and the Brittenham and Felix Pollock Prize in Poetry. He's the recipient of an Academy of American Poets Prize, scholarships to the Southampton Writers Conference and the New York State Summer Writers Institute, and a 2025 Best of the Net nomination. Originally from Alabama, he lives with his wife in Seattle. And I think that's it. So, let's see, who did I start with? Nhatt? Nobody knows. Okay. So take it away, writers. I think it was Nhatt. Thanks.
I'm really thankful for that introduction in so many ways. I feel like you really teed up this idea of, I often, especially if I'm starting reading, I feel a little bit bad because I'm a total bummer. But having you just set up the fact that we're like, a lot of us are engaging with things that are not maybe the most cheerful of subjects feels really good. So thank you. This is an essay about, why is that happening? Okay. This is an essay from a book that's forthcoming, I think, in 2027, called The Forest Bison. Have you ever walked around a big city and wondered what it looked like before it grew into the concrete, stone, and flesh mechanism it is today? It wasn't hard for me to picture it in Seattle, my first city, where the forests, beaches, and mountains live so close to its outskirts that a short drive would put you in a pre-Seattle northwestern landscape. But when I immigrated to London, the original landscape became harder to see, harder to imagine. I would escape the city on the weekends, taking long bike rides along canals and country lanes, discovering that the nature of human impact on the wilderness was very different in the UK than it was in the foothills of the Cascades. Back home, you could go into any bar on the Olympic Peninsula and meet someone whose father, grandfather, and great-grandfather were loggers or tree planters, or occasionally both. But in England, the countryside had been deforested by the Romans, leaving behind a country that was altered so long ago that what has replaced the woods has become a kind of a new natural, a wilderness that has adapted to work alongside farms, small pockets of managed woodlands, and National Trust tea rooms. I love England with my whole heart, but it threw my ideas of nature, wildness, and the role humans play in it off kilter. Decades later, I stumbled across Białowieża, which felt like the missing puzzle piece from my London daydreams. This is European wilderness, this preserve on the far eastern border of Poland. I spent hours staring at photos of lush green moss, fallen trees, mushrooms, and of course, bison. As a poet, there are a few words that, when combined, create a lightning-like zing inside of me. Beach smoke, birthday whiskey. And now the words forest bison internally echoed like a mantra, and I knew I had to go to the forest. In the year between reading about Białowieża and actually going there, Russia invaded Ukraine. This is horrific on so many levels, my laptop flooding with photos of refugees streaming across the border into Poland, my friends in Krakow taking the train to Warsaw to help displaced families find places to go. Even in that first wave of refugees, there were already stories of people being turned away from the Polish border. Ukrainians whose families were originally African, or college students from the Middle East who didn't look Ukrainian enough to be welcomed. Then, as a response to EU sanctions against Russia, Belarus created a fake EU visa program to bring people escaping war in their own countries to Europe. People from Syria, Cameroon, and Iran brought what they thought were real visas, only to arrive in Belarus and be forced into camps before being pushed through the forest into Poland with no resources. Suddenly, the sleepy towns that surrounded the forest were filled with the lost, injured, and dead. In response, Poland declared the area around the forest an exclusion zone. No one from Doctors Without Borders or the Red Cross, only residents and the military. Everyone else, doctors, activists, and refugees, were banned and arrested on sight, leaving the ordinary people who lived there as the only help available to those injured and lost in the woods. I think about this a lot from my home on the Olympic Peninsula. I imagine refugees fleeing from Canada into Forks, a small conservative town surrounded by a national forest, arriving cold, injured, and having to rely on overwhelmed local people for support, people whose politics may or may not be welcoming to immigrants. The naturalist Adam Wojrak told me about his neighbor in Tereminsky, a right-wing anti-immigration proponent, calling him and asking if he could come over immediately. Wojrak found the man and his family sitting around a table, staring at a man so dark that his skin contained shades of blue. The man was from Cameroon and spoke no Polish. He was eating a plate of food prepared by Wojrak's neighbor, and the family wanted to know what they could do to help him. Not all of the stories are this transformational. Many villagers were terrified of hungry, desperate refugees breaking into their homes and angry about the trash left behind in the woods. I even had one man tell me that if I'm so concerned with preserving the environment, I should be in favor of sending these people back to their home countries. The arguments always seem to come down to this false polarization. Do we care about preserving people or the natural world? I arrived in the forest a few months after the occupation restrictions were lifted. Poland's newly built border wall stood gleaming in the late September sunlight, and the sounds of the red deer in their mating season were echoing in the distance. Walking through these woods with my guide, I was struck by how many signs of human activity remained even in the most protected part of the forest. What was considered the Platonic ideal of wilderness in the 19th century included traces of people in the woods, old roads, tombs, beekeeping. Wojrak pointed out places where people harvested coal and honey. People have always been in the forest. The trick is to keep the balance between us and the rest of the natural world. Part of the reason the woods have survived is because of the bison. Generations of Polish royalty preserved Białowieża as a hunting garden, a place they could come to easily kill bear, elk, deer, and of course, bison. Without the money and the decree of the wealthy rulers, Białowieża would probably look a lot like the countryside surrounding it, rolling fields that have been used for agriculture for hundreds of years. These days, the forest is a national park and a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Though it feels terrifying and incongruous to find refugees in these woods, it is not the first time people have hidden from an authoritarian regime here. Not the first time this soil has been soaked in blood. Białowieża was here when the Nazis sent SS soldiers to learn to kill, massacring hundreds of Jewish villagers. Its wilderness also captivated the minds of the Heck brothers, Nazi zoologists who tried to recreate the long-extinct auroch, an ancient beast designed to match the Übermensch. With fascism on the rise worldwide, it's not surprising that so many of us are again preoccupied with this idea of true wilderness, of perfection that lies beyond human touch, even when our fingerprints are so deeply entrenched in it. The idea of wilderness is an idea rooted in othering. This is sacred and that profane. Białowieża is a testament to how humans can manage and mismanage a forest, and how intertwined we all are. The current crisis throws a hard light on a universal truth. People, animals, and trees suffer when governments use fear as a tool to make policies for places that those in charge have very little understanding of, to build things like border walls. I spent a month in Podolaski, the region where the forest is located. I walked in the woods, and I spoke with people who had lived on the borders of the forest for generations, and people who had lived there and people who had moved there to be closer to the natural world. The gorgeous family that ran the guest house I lived in had spent months and months going into the woods to support people at the height of the crisis, stumbling across people dying in the woods that they'd moved their children to so that they could grow up understanding nature. I met so many people holding trauma, and there was still so much work to do, so many refugees still traveling despite the new wall. Grupo Graniza, a network of volunteer activists helping people who have crossed, provides essential assistance through a phone number passed between people trying to cross. One of my last days in Podolaski, I was with Grupo Graniza volunteers when a call came through that 2 men were in the woods near us. We assembled a backpack full of dry clothes, hot soup, new SIM cards, and a phone battery bank. I was ushered into a room full of dark donated clothing and left to find waterproof trousers, boots, and a winter jacket that would fit me. We drove erratically, turning around a few times until we pulled over and ran out of the car and into the woods. It is illegal to provide support to refugees, so it was important that we weren't seen going into the woods. The young volunteer in charge held the GPS tracker in front of her like a dowsing rod, trying to navigate the downed trees and continue leading us towards the 2 men in the woods. After 20 minutes of searching, we found them sitting against a fallen tree. The men were Syrian and had been in the woods for 5 days. They told us that they had to wait for 2 more before meeting a taxi that was going to take them to Germany. They were incredibly kind. Both men wanted to ensure we didn't want any of the food that we'd brought them, and they were as concerned with our safety as we were with theirs. Before we left, they asked if we could take a selfie with them. They wanted to send it to their parents as proof there are still good people in the world. I don't know what happened to those 2 kind men. After I watched them disappear into the woods, I drove back to my guest house, my dinner waiting in the oven. I was only a few kilometers from where they would be trying to sleep in a frozen, swampy woodland. But in many ways, they were lucky. As of January 2025, journalists estimate that 130 people have died attempting to cross the forest border. On my last day, I climbed into my rental car and I headed south towards a charter cemetery about an hour away. Because many of the immigrants who died in the woods were Muslim, and most had very little, if any, identifying documents, the bodies were laid to rest at the closest mosque in an area set aside specifically for them. Tartars are a Muslim minority in Poland, a holdover from before Constantine converted to Christianity. The cemetery was outside another small village with a corner cafe, advertising a mixture of traditional Tartar and Polish foods. I easily found the section of the cemetery that held the bodies of the refugees, small shields denoting what little was known about them, lanterns and plastic blue and pink flowers adorning the mounds where their bodies lay. The graves lay facing the cemetery fence that separated the graveyard from the fields and the woods. As I stood there, a strong wind caused the distant trees to sway, and I saw the glint of the steel wall in the distance. Thank you.
Hi, can everyone hear me okay? Okay. First, I just want to say thank you to Levi and Kathleen and Aisha and everyone at Jack Straw. I'll be reading a few poems tonight. The first poem I'm reading is called Mirror. My mother calls me, and I'm at the bathroom counter this time, toothpaste foaming around my mouth. She blows onto her ramen, asks if I've eaten yet. I look at myself in the mirror every morning now, think about how I only believed in God whenever I wanted to not want to kill myself. How I only stopped when I remembered the mother of my mother, her name unknown to us both. My face, the only thing my mother can pretend to remember her by. I look at myself in the mirror every morning and tell my grandmother she was the most beautiful 23-year-old I've seen. On FaceTime, I tell my mother I will be eating soon. My plate heavy with everything I can possibly eat, my stomach so full it will hurt, I will never be afraid of starving. This poem is titled Learning How to Fish Again. In my dreams, my father teaches me how to fish again. Beneath the August sun, I watch my hands become his, the alligator skin, the space between our knuckles lined and dry like mud cracks. I only remember the difference when he grabs my hand to hold the fishing pole, and I feel the years of genocide and civil war, the untouched field of landmines stretching endlessly between us. In California, I reimagine his life. I hold a book of poetry. I look at my hands and see only my father's. I imagine my father holding the poems. In this body, my father does not witness the bombings or the bodies and only reads stories about them instead. In class, I Google the age of my professor who cries every time he speaks of tenderness in the Victorian literature he loves. 1967, 2 years younger than my father, and my hands become my hands again, the guilt of freedom heavy in my palms. He never told me the dreams he had for his own life. All I can picture is the rural night sky, milky and struck with stars. A river pregnant with fish ready for catching. My father beside me, his right hand in a fist, jerking up to signal that I must stop reeling and pull. When I dream of fish, I remember again that I am my father's daughter. I do not have to reimagine his life. In this one, we catch the fish together. My next poem is Cambodia Remembers Gaza. This is what stays with me. My mother, barefoot, crying on the street, holding her mother's hand, too young to understand why the men are shouting with guns in their hands. The way she tells me she doesn't know where her grandmother went, like I don't know where my grandmother went. I see you, children of Gaza, lifted from rubble, eating bread made of donkey feed, dreaming of sugar. And I know you will be, like my mother, alive in your motherland with your olive trees. And my last poem is titled Affirmation. Every poem I write opens with a parent's. How else do I bless the ones that birthed me? I didn't ask to be alive, but then they showed me how beautiful the world could be. Chickens in the backyard, meteor showers from a Mount Tahoma parking lot, Sin Sisamut songs, pickles and grilled fish. I don't know how to tell them, I love you. Do they know this? One day I will publish a book, so the only surviving photo of my mother and her mother will always live somewhere on this tender earth. Wherever I go, I will plant the fruit trees that grew by my father's hand. Thank you.
Hi, that was beautiful. I'm Hillary. Thank you for coming out to hear all of us read tonight. And thank you to everyone at Jack Straw for all the work you're doing to make the Writers Program so impactful for all of us. Kathleen, Levi, Aisha, David, the other engineering teaching artists, our fantastic vocal coaches, and everyone in my cohort of writers. I came to fiction writing sort of late in the game, and my debut collection of short stories, Lake Effect, is coming out next year. A couple of the characters from those stories just won't let go of me, and they evidently have more of their story to tell. So tonight, you'll hear from them. I'm going to read a short chapter from my novel in progress. The working title of the novel is All Over the Map, which sometimes describes me, the book, and many of the folks who populate its pages. Some of what happens in these pages is not easy to hear, so please do what you need to do to keep yourself safe tonight. The chapter is called Fields of Vision. Miles watches as the ant taps one antenna to a millimeter stalk of hair growing out of a freckle. He doesn't feel anything. The touch is that light. But he can see the ant make contact through the round hole of a brown cardboard toilet paper roll he's holding up to his right eye. His left eye is closed, so the whole world is reduced to a coin of his own tan, speckled flesh. The ant's body is 3 hinged black spitballs, 6 delicate legs barely attached, and 2 antennae easily mistaken for another pair of legs growing out of the side of the ant's tear-shaped head. The cardboard scope limits Miles' field of vision and removes all worldly context. The rest of his body, the dirt he sits on, the air he breathes. He and the ant are equals in perception. Neither can see his scraped knee, a recently healed gash on his shin, the tent at his back, and his mother asleep inside. None of this is visible, just Miles and the ant observing each other through a tunnel of damp cardboard. When the ant crawls out of view, Miles gently brushes it onto the ground and stands up, still holding the paper tube to his eye like a pirate's spyglass and slowly looking about. He watches a circle of pure blue sky until a tendril of white clouds intrudes. A man is walking away from the encampment, about 10 yards from where Miles stands, and Miles captures a circle of flannel and a ring of black hair. As the man moves farther away, more of the man's body becomes visible in Miles' lensless viewfinder. The man is wearing cowboy boots. His jeans sag. He carries 2 white plastic trash bags bulging with weight. And then he's gone, out of sight, under the overpass. But mostly, Miles uses the tube to look at a world intentionally devoid of people. He keeps his cyclops eye trained on the sky, the ground, countless tiny creatures, and green growing things. He lays back down, legs stretched out straight in front of him to look up at the sky again, searching for a few more cloudless patches of blue before dark-bottom rain clouds gobble them up. The circle fills. Faded pink cotton of Missy's hoodie, a small patch of neck skin, a coil of red hair, and the edge of her mouth. He lowers the tube and opens both eyes to let all of her in. She reaches down and pulls him up. "Come on, baby, I made something for you to eat." She hands him a peanut butter sandwich on soft white bread. He tries to poke a dirty finger through the center of the bread, and when that doesn't work, he folds the sandwich in half and bites. When he unfolds the bread, he's created a mouth-shaped opening, which he holds up to his eye. Now he can see the jagged edges of the chain-link fence, the piles of trash, and the broken gas pumps. A bit of jam drips onto his cheek, and Missy wipes it away with her finger and licks her finger clean. They're camped in a vacant lot adjacent to the abandoned Arco station at the edge of a small industrial strip, a valley of sorts between Beacon Hill and the freeway ramps. The city hasn't bothered to fence this corner off. Maybe the place is still toxic, empty gas tanks stacked beneath the broken cement. One of the few spots the resettlement teams are in no hurry to sweep them from. Missy says the underground tanks are as big as whales, and Miles drifts off to sleep thinking about the slumbering sea monsters. She's gone for less than 20 minutes. Only enough time to get into a guy's car, give him a hand job he mistakenly believes to be a blowjob, pocket $20, and run back, wiping her sticky palm on the leaves of a bush along the way. There's no moon. Someone has shot out both of the streetlights that used to keep the vacant lot lit up like day all night long. She sees the sides of their tent moving, and she thinks it's the wind. But the night is still. She hurls herself through the open tent flap, landing on top of a dark shadow, moving up and down on Miles. Scream caught tight in her chest, she attacks the man's back, legs wrapping around his waist, fingernails clawing at his head and face, ripping out chunks of thin hair. Jesus, get the fuck off me, you crazy little cunt. Missy stays clamped on tight. Her scream finally makes it up into her throat and out of her mouth. Barely human what comes out, no language she's ever spoken. Whatever it means, the sound is loud enough to wake the others. A chorus of shouts echoes back to her. The bear of a man rears up, and they fall backwards together, him on top, her crushed beneath. There are more shouts, and someone whacks the outside of the tent with a stick. He shakes her off and is up and gone, shoving and dodging his way between bodies to the edge of the lot and into the thick brush at the base of the hillside. Missy and Miles are alone in the tent. It's still so dark. All she can see are Miles' wide-open eyes. She pats him with her hands all across his body, which is still fully zipped inside the mummy-style sleeping bag, the drawstring tight around his twig neck, his face surrounded by a ring of soft padding. The outside of the bag is sticky with spunk. Her fingers smear the thick white gunk across the bag as she runs her hands along the length of his body. Miles. She's sobbing now, an almost silent choking sound, and it is Miles who's trying to comfort her. It's okay, Mama. The bear didn't hurt me. I played dead. What? I played dead, like you're supposed to with a bear. And now she's holding him, rocking him back and forth, smushing the damp, rancid sludge on the sleeping bag between their bodies. They stay like this, clamped tight together until first light. Miles asleep in her arms, her eyes wide open. The dawn is gray and only dimly illuminates the thin inner walls of the tent. Missy surveys the damage over the top of Miles' head. She pulls her body away from his, aware of the intruder's smell still thick between them. She peels off her own hoodie and tosses it into the corner of the tent, and then proceeds to unzip the soft cocoon of Miles' sleeping bag. She's careful not to let the outside of the sleeping bag touch either of them again, balling up the whole thing and shoving it into the same corner as her sweatshirt. She thinks the bear, no, the man, must have pissed in the tent. But the smell is Miles. I'm sorry, Mama. No, baby, it's not your fault. Let's get those wet pants off you. All of it goes into the corner of the tent, every single item of clothing he's wearing. When her child is naked, she surveys his little chest, his pale brown legs, and the ashy pink knobs of his knees. You sure that man didn't touch you anywhere, inside the sleeping bag? Yeah, I'm sure, Mama. She is careful to call the creature a man and not a bear. She doesn't want Miles to think the attacker was something natural or blameless, like a wild animal. He looks at her with a confused stare, and she realizes he doesn't totally understand or maybe even fully remember what happened in the night. She resists telling him it was just a bad dream. She's unwilling to gaslight some future memory that may return to him at some distant time when she is not with him and unable to explain what really went down. And she asks him again, "Did that man put his hands inside your bag?" "No, Mama. Did he hurt you?" "He smelled bad, like raw chicken. And he was heavy, like a boulder, like a bear, like a fucking dinosaur." And then he laughs. And Missy, she can't help herself and snorts too. She pulls his small body back into her arms and sits cross-legged with him in her lap, his jutting shoulder blades pushing back against her chest. She helps him to pull on a clean pair of underpants, red with blue piping and tiny, square yellow SpongeBobs all over them. Next comes his soft gray sweatpants. He hates zippers, snaps, and buttons. They irritate him. Everything needs to be smooth against his skin. She rips off the stiff tags on the collars of all of his T-shirts. She uses her teeth, gnawing at the fabric before he wears them so that the tags won't scratch at the back of his neck. Once on, he pulls the clean cotton front of the T-shirt into his mouth and sucks on it, leaving a damp, puckered-up place on the cloth. And then he sucks on the strings of his hoodie. This morning, she doesn't pull the wet strings out of his mouth or tell him it's gross. It is gross. Instead, she digs around and tosses him a granola bar to munch on while she shoves the rest of their crap into her pack. She scoops up his 3 worn Beanie Babies and gently places 2 of them in his knapsack and hands the 3rd directly to him. A limp brown and white cat he calls Pow because that's what he thinks it says on the torn paper heart stapled to the creature's ear. He tucks Pow into the top of his sweatpants so that just the head and front paws of the creature emerge above his elastic waistband. They leave the sleeping bag, the soiled clothes, and the tent behind. They will not come back here. Together, after dark, they patrol the perimeter of the driving range adjacent to Jefferson Park, collecting the rogue balls that have somehow miraculously escaped the 3-story chain-link fence and overhead netting. Both of their arms are skinny enough to wiggle through the diamond-shaped wire gaps and snag more of the small pocked white balls that accumulate in piles like so many tiny abandoned moons on their deep green artificial turf. They collect the white globes in a thin orange nylon bag. When they aren't using the bag, it rolls up on itself and folds into a tiny orange pouch, which Missy tucks into the rear pocket of her jeans, where it forms a small, soft lump on her butt. They love Jefferson Park at night. They wish they could stay here all day, close to the huge expanse of thick, real grass scattered with dandelions and clover and stretched taut over the hidden waters of the reservoir below. To the west, on the very edge of the park, at a viewpoint overlooking Spokane Street, someone has constructed a stone cairn, taller than Miles, a boulder-sized rock at its base, 3 stones stacked one on top of the other in descending size. The top stone is bigger than Miles' head. He and Missy debate whether or not the rocks are joined together by superglue or if the artist somehow drilled a hole through the center of each rock to hide a steel pipe. When Miles climbs up onto the top stone, he can see all the way to downtown, catching glimpses of the water, the stadiums, prehistoric-looking cranes and container ships. He can make each skyscraper disappear, one after the other, when he holds up both hands to the light. They're that far away. Other children will remember the houses they have lived in. Miles will remember this park. Thank you.
Alrighty. Thank you all for being here. It's great to see a packed house, and thank you to all the wonderful people behind the scenes that have made this night come together. I'm going to start with a poem from the anthology, and this poem kind of takes place out here in U District. Maybe you'll recognize or be able to kind of put yourself in some of the places. And I'll dedicate this to the poor Seattle 10 theater that got shut down just a little bit ago. After walking up the hill, you eat a slice of pizza in a bar that's mostly a pizza shop, or it is a pizza shop, but mostly looks like a bar, with lines of bottles and large pies and glass cases like discs of diamond. Music in your headphones as you lift and crack the spine of each slice with a napkin-gloved hand. You don't test the germs from the train, handrails, the theater recliners you've escaped mid-double feature with friends you're seeing for the first time outside of work. You don't feel lonely as you'd expected, largely because you're eating too fast and the songs are playing in an order that transforms the mundane the way you hope for. A man at the theater compliments your fuzzy jacket. You're not so cold, though you dress more for the moment than the weather. This morning, Alexa asks if you'd like to know the weather report to start your day. You've been late to teaching twice now because of ice, but you say no. You pass beautiful people in tea shops, pushing pearls and glass jelly around with their straws, smiling between jokes and anecdotes, or eyes glued to study guides. Packs of students coasting down the street with so little weight, it seems. You walk alone. You walk so fast, it hurts your shins. You push on. You listen to Johnny Cash. You take the train. It's quiet, though your head is filled with noise and noise. Cold, dark, halfway home, you see a patch of grass growing high on the bridge, like a wig discarded, left there to rise. I see Bill Hollins is here and Sigrun Susan. Last time we had some wonderful energy with them. They were so funny and everyone was clapping and having a great time. So I'd love to channel some of that, even though, even though my, my work is not nearly as funny and probably more tragic than any of the stuff you've heard so far. All right. We'll get into some family stuff, some stuff about the South, some things about God, and a couple fun ones. This one, we'll see. Maybe they're not fun. But this one's called Quality Time. My mother likes to ruin our visits together for her own good. It's easier to leave behind what's left a wound. We drove back to Texas the only day the paralyzing southern snow fell. I knew we should have turned back in Louisiana after the Ouroboros of anger, 4 hours of silence. Then Pandora Radio found every curse she wanted to chant over me. When we arrived at dusk, she told me she was driving 10 hours back home right then. Bye, not goodbye. I couldn't trust the road, so I bent my arm into the van's door jamb. Morning brought a kind of mercy, a nail file smoothing a returning edge. My weary soul given like a bull on the pyre makes her clean. Our tradition passed down for years. We made the best of last days, finding rainbows in dried puddles of snow. Her arms around me apologize for the brain that wants to drive her off the road. The part she'll try to evict when she returns home. The part I've locked away in myself. This next one is also about my mom and also about being in the car. It's called Driving Away. Before she brought me forth, I wish she'd known how much more she'd need to take away, the mom I knew marooned in Alabama. Moves to Mississippi, Florida, and Tennessee, and she can't return without a flat tire, financial fiasco, old lovers making pilgrimage who could undo the curse, but instead scrape off the lonely single dad veneer. Let kindnesses find their ends. I've waited ages to say I'm not sure she's still trapped in that town where nothing is named for what it is. An invisible woman of sorts, renting out my head's last motel room. My eyes stray after Miles, a song she likes on the radio. Sometimes I think I see her in my rear view, trailing in her ghostly Mercedes, tapping ash to asphalt, exiting where there is no exit. Thanks. This next one's called Alabama. I used to say I was a miraculous birth, some poor child divinely snatched from a couple in the burrows and placed in my mother's womb instead. I wasn't meant for a southern accent and avoided most of it, except for one word, buggy, for shopping cart. Like my ancestors must have ridden on and on until the Black Warrior's song became a start. Alabama, you taught lessons with bees and heartbreak, a sting on the eyelid at Snow Hinton Park, lust for love, Freud might say, divorce had planted in me. You didn't care for the women's jeans I wore when the bling era reigned supreme, the off-brand Air Forces on my feet while country cowboys fed their families with factory work, their boots licked with sparks from welding cars they couldn't even drive to the lot. You blew my swish of bangs into my eyes, depression into my lungs. The Nigerian sisters at church said, I must be hiding someone behind all that hair. There were the times I collapsed to the floor at pastor's touch and spirit fall, and all the promises God gave in that broken place within your bones. Have you taken them away and locked them with old skin shed? You saw the seasons when friends would go mute for a day, make me invisible for a trick laughed off last minute, and the gay jokes shot like arrows toward any flesh left lying, still uncalloused, in those underfunded hallways of no electives and Spanish class broadcast on satellite. It's odd to miss the place I couldn't wait to leave. Stockholm nostalgia for rows of corn and wheat and little groceries changing hands, one-lane roads leading away, away. How did you make fast food feel like family tradition in my mother's dog-tired hands? Or hunting trips, playing my Game Boy in silence, my father staring out into the daybreak forest, returning home empty-handed. I wish I could return, little piece of childhood, of sugar-coated French fries, lighter fluid lit on ripped jeans, of fetish peddled on PE bleachers, and first kisses in rumored ditches, secrets kept until their power's gone, where across the tracks was just another neighborhood, and ambition went to settle down, where I would devour desire you gave for everything, not your crimson soil. All right. This is a fun memory with my dad, kind of throughout my life, but particularly a couple years ago. This one's called Seasoning. After the split, I'd visit on weekends, sprawl across the arms of his office chair and drink apple juice, eat leftover Howie's pizza cold. I drew a gallery for the fridge door, spent hours online taking care of digital pets, talking to strangers in chat rooms, watching the revolving door of highlights come around again on ESPN. I'd often wander through the house while my dad was knocked out, night shift tired, always looking as if he'd been awake all his life until my mother called to say I'd be there for dinner. Even now, meals mark his days like sundials of smell. He's always telling me what we'll eat when I make it down for Christmas or the first of summer. And when I do, he buys custom cuts of steak at the grocery store or mixes together 3 types of ground beef. We feast for days until the plates are bare, the blend of spices blooming beneath our knives. I remember being around 10 when I had my first crawfish. He boiled them in a cauldron of mythic size in the yard, and while everyone drank cold beer, I dipped my fingers into the jar of Cajun seasoning. Last summer, we found the largest pot in the store. I might as well get the one I want, he said. We stopped at a shack with a rundown marquee for a 40-pound bag of live crawfish, watched them fall into water brown with zest. His beard was gray in places, covering that face of meetings and partings. That day, even after the scent had faded from our private festival, we sat savoring the golden meat, throwing the husks into a bucket between us. Thanks. This next one, it falls into a tradition I like that a lot of other poets do, that they read the poem that they most recently wrote. And this is something I wrote about 2 days ago, and I sent it to a friend. I said, this might be a poem. And I woke up the next morning, and she said, yeah, this is a poem. And this poem pays a little homage to chopped and screwed music, really awesome music from Houston in the early 2000s. If you know anything about that, maybe this is me channeling some Bill Hollins too, the king of references. I know I'm making him uncomfortable with all the name drops, but anyway, so there's a little bit about that. This is called Something Left. After running down the road a distance, the music in my ears begins to slow, almost Houstonian, chopped and screwed. Back then, they didn't want me. From the South, I got this diamond in my mouth. As a child, I thought husky men with giftedly low voices were hired to do those parts in classic songs. I believed in the supernatural with wonder, wanted to be like them when my voice grew its own scratchy register. As with every race, I'm trying to outrun my demons, perpetually out of shape since the time I tried to run a half marathon. I knew what it meant to live with pain like armor. But what could penetrate those walls of silken sorrow woven? Though my breathing is far worse since that shared sickness overcame me in the snow, I want to quit along the way when my ears hear halfway point, too slow. This time, I don't. I pray hollowing breaths. Perhaps I don't breathe for moments at a time. When I can see the finish or some semblance, I forget about my body. If something waits around the final turn to get me when I'm vulnerable, still I think of writing a poem. I know I am done. Beauty will be there long after, when my shoes are filled with just my heat, something left for cameras. Thanks. This is a love poem. This one's called Tangles, and it should be out pretty soon in the Hong Kong Review, which is a really wonderful print magazine. Tangles. My arms pulled into a travel pillow of sorts around my wife's head. Our legs in a fishtail braid, destined for numbness if I don't say something. The more twisted, the better, must be her philosophy, though she opts instead for comfy to characterize these positions we find ourselves in. 2 minutes not working on something, and she's out cold, forgetting the ever-growing list unrolling from her tongue. My approach to sleep is more methodical by necessity. My back must be straight, one leg curled into hers, the other extending from the spine. My head straight forward like a soldier behind a comrade, marching into the darkness until the bombs come in the morning. Garbage trucks, with their unknown schedules that transcend the days, which have by now lost their own sense of order. Steady work and teacher pay come back after the summer, and the daily joys of marriage become hard to carry, not due to their weight, but because there's just no good way to grab hold of them. There's still boxes in the living room, still the fallen closet rail, odd ends that barely had a proper place before we moved in together. Too many wake-up kisses, the stir-fry on my breath lingering like my mom when I finally call. My wife makes me think even more of all the moments that make up a day, all the ones I waste. Love adds, but it can't take away these worn parts of me. Days start with a crack of the neck, cold air outside the sheets and half-open eyes that drive her to work and back. We march into the night with two different cadences. I over-prepare for the journey and wake exhausted. She travels light and tells me about her dreams in the middle of the night. They are worth all that I lose. All right, I've got two more, and these are some of the last in the book that I've been working on. And they're both kind of reconciliatory God poems. This poem in particular has some fun references if you watch trashy late night TV, and also if you've seen that like amazing like best love songs compilation that they used to advertise like every single commercial break in the 2000s. This one's called Psalm with Static. Lord of the broken lot, as I used to hear on late night TV, I can accept your baggage, which we carry together, you say. I miss you in a new way this year. I betray my old devotion, seek my own saints, dead poets, piles of snow like tortoises in the shade, little boxes and bags along the road with breadcrumbs, dried ketchup. I leave the window open for you, a lantern that distance soon consumes. I look down and wonder if the neighbor with 2 dogs sees me naked, strolling the house to wash. Maybe he's writing a poem too. My odd pale image, the trees before, the hill, the yard, dressed with snow. God, are you a commercial in the night for love songs lost for lips? Despite your heel spur, I wouldn't trade you. I think, I know. You see my best like a star unnamed, a faint white light in the corner of your room. All right, and this is my last one. It's called Missing You. God, how many years have you been away on vacation? Sending unsigned postcards folded into swans, now an osmanthus bouquet. I've longed to see you coming back from afar, like you did before a cuckoo crafted a nest in the hollow of my side? Are you shower steam and viperfish? Have you hidden a new address for us in Alpha Centauri? Will heaven be the end or the beginning? I don't know. Maybe we're both the sort others label as awfully quiet. I have the hardest time believing you can make angels sing in this burning cathedral. So help me, forgive all I've left at your office door in piles. Lord, friend, tell me a secret. Tell me about your day. Thanks.